Well, welcome everybody. We're very excited about today's workshop, which is the fifth in the series in the Community Engagement in Climate Action Research Workshops. And this series is made possible by a grant from the California Strategic Growth Council. So I'd like to extend a special thank you to them. Today's topic is community perspectives on community academic collaborations. And this is an opportunity for us to hear from community-based organizations and to discuss ways to encourage community academic partnerships. I'd like to thank Margarita Gonzalez Macedonio for moderating today, as well as facilitating a breakout room, and our other breakout room facilitators, Tony Marks Block, Nicholas Galvez Lopez, and Silas Grant. Margarita is a principal. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. Margarita is a principal community planner who has been working for the city of Santa Ana since June 2007. She supervises the Neighborhood Initiatives and Environmental Services section, which provides training, grant support, and public engagement for development projects and citywide public policies. Margarita serves as the environmental justice staff person overseeing the implementation of the city's general plan environmental justice policies, and she collaborates with disadvantaged communities, regulatory agencies, and other departments on investigating pollution exposure concerns, technical assistance, and funding to help reduce harmful pollutants and associated health risks in the community. She holds a master's degree in urban planning from UCLA. Margarita will explain the format for today's workshop and share insights and lessons learned on including community perspectives into our collaborations that center around building relationships, leveraging existing community assets and networks, and providing resources available to support ongoing community involvement in our climate priority setting and climate action partnerships. Margarita Macedonio.
Thank you, Betty, and thank you everyone for being here. Before I proceed with my presentation, I thought I would take this opportunity to go over the format for today's workshop. So following my presentation, which will be brief, we will have some instructions on the breakout sessions, and we will have about 45 minutes of time to do a lot of sharing within the small group discussions on insights, and we have some questions that will help gauge that discussion. Following that, we'll have an opportunity to read out what's shared, and we will also proceed with group discussions after. And we have the team at UCOP helping us to provide access to the Padlet to capture the discussion points, which will be key to documenting and just documenting this effort and really making some connections with the topics today. So thank you. Now I'm going to share my screen.
And if you have trouble with that, I also sent the slides to Nick.
Okay, great. So let's try this. All right. So the first, again, these are lessons learned, right, in my journey here as an urban planner, and really trying to engage communities on a lot of different policies. Right now, climate change, climate action, environmental justice is the focus of the section that I oversee. And part of that, entails the ability to establish trust in the communities of concern, forming those relationships, building networks, and being able to make connections and get really familiar with the neighborhoods that we want to involve, that we want to learn from, and understanding, what is it that's they are experiencing from their lens, and how we can help be a bridge and provide resources and and use the expertise that they have. So that's something that has been of importance in guiding how we work with neighborhoods. Um, in my community that I serve, we have 64 active neighborhoods. They're all in different places. However, it does require that level of time, and trust takes time. And it takes, learning a little bit about the background of the communities that we have these climate project opportunities to collaborate with that would involve and benefit directly from this work. And some of that learning has involved, how do we communicate best with communities in terms of opening opportunities for them to collaborate on these projects? And what are ways that they can be able to share with others and include others along the journey of the climate building efforts that we're trying to do here? So some of these insights that I wanted to share have to do with the disadvantaged communities that I'm working with, and really um, taking the time, to have these conversations about concerns that they have about, for example, industrial uses next to residential. What is it that they're breathing? Why are there violations that regulatory agencies are placing, and what does that mean? What does a groundwater cleanup mean in terms of the water I'm currently drinking right now that's provided in my community? Those are the types of questions that we're receiving as we're working with neighborhoods to provide more education about environmental justice, about climate change, and what that means for them. And so there are a lot of gaps in terms of communication. We have some of our oldest neighborhoods that are part of a groundwater cleanup effort, and the neighbors have been living there for generations. And although the cleanup effort has been underway with several industrial sites, you have families that are still not aware, or they don't fully understand what that means. And so learning that insight has been helpful to be able to reach out to the agencies and try to foster these conversations more frequently, but in a way where community members could have a fuller understanding of what are the effects, what does it mean, for me. And so that has been helpful to create this space, this relationship, to have conversations, including uncomfortable ones where there's some disagreement about, why is a cleanup happening, next to my site? Um, why is it taking so long? And how am I exposed to by me living in an area where there's a lot of other contamination? What does it mean for me and my family? So those types of uncomfortable conversations are just as important to enhance our ability to cultivate and strengthen that trust that we have with community members. And part of the learning has been to also acknowledge the work that other advocacy groups have been dedicating for a long time in some of the same neighborhoods. So doing more awareness about soil lead contamination and what that means, and how to work with community members to provide information, studies to help get their children tested for blood lead levels. And that has been the educational journey, and knowing that there are other groups that has been important to connect with to help collaborate and and help find ways to support each other, and ways to get the message out through our different networks. So we do and part of that network entails the school system, the school parents, the family centers that are co-located at some of our schools, helping to learn what other youth networks are in the area, informal and formal. Where are they hanging out? Where do we know? Where could we be able to engage more with youth? What about our faith-based, communities that have a lot of people, that attend that may not be knowledgeable? How do we, build connections with them? And many times we have local community-based organizations that are already partnering with our faith-based communities, and how all of those help build the assets that we need to think about as we're expanding our community academic partnerships around climate actions and climate justice. There have been a lot of neighborhoods that have been active for generations. They are perhaps focused on special events or job trainings, other resources. A lot of them, the feedback that we've heard have to do with understanding what are the roles, the responsibilities between landlords and tenants, and how do we engage with those groups as well. And and also other city departments or the municipal agency that's responding, the communities that you are working with or you're thinking about working with, and engaging with the public agency staff that may already have projects in the areas. There may be some meetings coming up that provide avenues to loop into those spaces to be able to also reach out and get to know community members and the community organizations that are supporting the overall community. Lastly, providing resources to support ongoing community involvement. That has been something that my team has been focused around based on feedback from our neighborhoods. So we understand that if there is a way that we can provide resources and support that will help provide food at some of the meetings, transportation, coordination to these meetings, an opportunity for childcare so that we can get more parents engaged, language support service like interpretation and translation, all of that are the basic needs that will help ensure that people are at the table when we're having these discussions, but also to help design and influence um, the projects that we're wanting to engage them with. There are a lot of events in whether the city is holding them or they're neighborhood initiated events, that those are other spaces to be able to collaborate, to be able to work with groups that are organizing those events to help expand the way that we can be more inclusive in our projects. One area that we've explored even further is to identify community-based organizations that provide fiscal sponsorship. And this would be a way, if there is an opportunity in our grants to be able to compensate community members for their expertise, for their time, we will be able to sustain more of an ongoing effort that would go beyond the life of the project and the collaboration that we're trying to bring, which is beneficial. And it's an opportunity to also compensate community-based organizations so that they are helping to provide a train the trainer type of format to engage other community members that we may not be aware of that can also be part of this inclusive process. And lastly, to check in with what community members, what is it that they need to continue to stay involved, to move our climate action projects forward, and how is it that we can continue to work with them to try to meet them in terms of resources, support, etc. So these are just some highlights, but I just thought this would be helpful to kick off our discussion in small groups as it relates to our climate change priorities, or even to evaluate where we're at this point.
Thank you so much, Margarita, for sharing those important insights. So I'm going to show you the next slide, which will give you the questions to consider when we get into breakout rooms. So you'll be randomly assigned to breakout rooms, and each room will have a facilitator as well as a UCOP support person. And then in the breakout rooms, you can go ahead and start with introductions, and then if applicable, to share your community climate priorities. And then to discuss the following questions. If you are representing a community organization, what do you need, support, resources, etc., to participate in a community academic collaboration? And if you are not representing a community organization, how would you apply the information shared in the opening presentation to include or expand community perspectives into your community academic collaboration? So with that, we will go into our breakout rooms and then come back and convene after the 45 minutes. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the main session. And it looks like everybody is here. So I will let Margarita go ahead and do the readout of the discussion from the breakout groups. You're muted, Margarita.
Thank you for letting me know I was muted. Okay. All right. So we just thank everyone again for sharing your insights and enhancing the learning and the appreciation of your climate community priorities that you all shared. I think it was great to learn that there are a lot of strong networks happening with community-based organizations, and it's just great to be able to confirm that and know that, you know, we have a resilient group here that's accomplishing a lot. In terms of the breakout groups, we wanted to understand what community climate priorities do participants have to share. And so let's see, Betty, did you want me to cover for all of them or just the room? I think I missed the first part, sorry.
Yeah, just go ahead and
Okay.
if you see any trends across all the rooms,
Sure.
just, yeah.
Yes. So it looks like, you know, from room one, from breakout room one, what does climate change, you know, mean to people? So that speaks to understanding what it means to the communities that are most, you know, impacted. See, we're stepping out of our comfort zone. Yes, I think that connects to the earlier comment in the presentation about, you know, being willing to have these uncomfortable conversations, know that people may not feel comfortable or they have disagreements, you know, for what climate change means to them or if it should be a priority. It depends on where and when, right? Especially across the state, there are some areas that are not as receptive. Definitely the themes about building trust are there, keeping those lines of communication open. I think right now what stands out from room two, the tools for locating the community groups, connecting them with the resources, the basic types of needs, you know, including language services so that they can continue to be engaged, not just at the meeting or during the grant, but you're trying to create an environment where there's sustainability so that the families, you know, and the generations after can continue to be part of the overall impact that we're trying to create together through our climate action partnerships. I did want to highlight on room 4 the sustainability strategies after the grant, raising expectations. So we're not just there temporarily and then we leave. Like there is that connection that we're trying to leave, with the community, noting that they have the support, even if it's beyond the life of the grant. One challenge that came up in our group in room 3 had to do with the idea of using fiscal, sponsors to help ensure that a lot of the funds and the resources are directed towards the communities that may not have a 501c3 established nonprofit. However, there were some highlights shared that have to do with the admin costs, right, that the fiscal sponsor may require that would not go directly to the community or the group that is benefiting from that. And what are some ways that we can think about that when we are writing the grants or pursuing other resource funding to ensure if we use that model that, we are being intentional and, making sure that we're maximizing as much of the offsetting what would go, towards this other fiscal sponsor CBO, that it would actually, we would carve out some funds that would go directly to the community members who would be benefiting directly so that they have access to those resources. Using technology, that stood out from room 2. It may not be a way to include a community, but there are other ways. For example, using creating your own like text messaging. A lot of communities that may not have access to the internet, it's through their phone. I mean, we're aware of that. So how can we encourage a lot of our community members to have their own networks and the capacity building to be successful when it comes to engaging others? Betty, is there something that you see that perhaps could be further highlighted?
In our group, we also talked about scientists including community members in conferences, that would be a way to connect.
And that speaks to resources, right? Making sure that we're being mindful to carve out those resources to be able to, include community members or other groups. In our group in room 3, we had some great discussions and tools that some of our group members are sharing in engaging with youth. So whether it's through a college fellowship program that's connected with CBOs that are advocating for climate change and doing a lot of, climate action projects. So what are other tools that we can have available using state funding or other type of existing funding that can help engage youth in a much more meaningful way so that we know that they're there for the long term, since in fact they are the future and they will be continuing to advance, and we need their help. And there's a lot of motivation from youth to get involved. So it's more like carving out those opportunities to include them. But I did appreciate the diversity of organizations that some of the group members are working with already. And it speaks to the importance of that trust and, being able to work in a community so they don't feel like we're like they're our subjects or our customers, right? It's mutual, and doing the work to establish that trust will go a long way. So it gets you connected to other spaces to be able to find more collaboration and just further advancement of what we're trying to accomplish here.
I think one of the things that stood out from my breakout group, in addition to having the conferences where they can build connections, is actually so that at those conferences, that they would learn about inventions or technologies and can start to the conversation about how to apply those technologies to their real lives.
Yes. I see in group 4 on other perspectives, a challenge is assessing the risk. What are the standards? How to prepare promotores to help increase awareness? How to get employers to adhere to standards? That is definitely a gap, right? In terms of how could our collaborations between community and academic help to address that capacity building, that assistance, getting materials in our group. The example was with the day labor organizations or that are helping to work with day laborers. How do we ensure that they are properly trained? And so finding, resources to be able to help provide, educate, and train groups to be better prepared in their outreach or in their capacity to do their job, I think is so important. And sometimes it's not, it's an oversight, right? And it may not be intentional, but this is helpful to bring out how else we can broaden the collaboration. It means meeting the needs, of our community members and how that capacity building can translate into some deliverables that are going to help prepare them and provide them with those resources.
It looks like we have a question, Isabella.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question, but I was thinking what it went on in group 2. And I think that part of the discussion was a lot about the fact that in all team, we developed some tools to relate to some specific community. And that was a process. And so how do we don't waste those tools? How we just come out with like a deliverable or a way to say, so in some community, it's better to connect with WhatsApp. In some other community, you have a first interaction and it's like, and so I think that we had an exchange of a lot of those ways. So you were citing a lot of ways, but the point was like, can we figure out how to maybe convey to the different team that may not even be aware of what a valuable deliverable they have in their hands to gather this information? Because, UCOP can gather, but the people that are doing it, they see better how they're, gathering. And so that we can just come out and have a series of approaches to deal with different community and have example of community, which doesn't mean that works 100%. But if I have to deal with a community that is different, it's like, I think that people have been developed, it takes years and it takes a long time to develop the right language, the right approach, the way to ask right question. What is they make you to meet people at the right level? So can we just gather this as an outcome and, subcategorize it for different community, and say, okay, this community, that's a better approach. This other community, this may be a better approach. And
Did want to respond to that because I think the intent is, how can we have the tools more prepared so that we know how best, to engage with different communities. And I would say that it's a little bit different because we can't anticipate, what each community is going to prefer until, we're there, right? Until we're there, we're talking. And so it's true, many times there's a lot of effort put into coming up with the tools you had called it, or the deliverables or the questions, right? But I think this helps us think a little bit more like, well, how can we, before we come up with the questions, right? How can we work with communities on the ground that already advocating for this, and how can we include their perspectives, or with youth, or with—
You're right, but how do you see, you're right, but you're coming from the community. You're talking to faculty and people in academia. They're not used to that. So to me, it's like, there is something, you need to learn that. I mean, I feel that I'm learning that. I need to just, exactly, how do I learn enough? How do I learn from them? And so I think that there can be some guideline in how to learn from people and how to, like, it is very, when you say those things for you are natural because you've been
Right.
doing it for a long time, but that's not natural for a lot of other people. And, and so is there a way that you can, I don't know if teaching is like, but it's like teaching to listen, teaching how to do this, or give some simple guideline for how to start to establish. Again, it could be that kind of communication. It can be like, they're going to hear me more if I write on WhatsApp than if I send them, a survey on something. But it can also be like, I need to talk, something that came out was like, well, we call and then we don't talk about the project right away. We talk about something else before. We just connect with the people. So those are all ways that we can teach people how to do better. And, people in academia may not be like, they don't do it because they're not good, but sometimes, and there's a lot of people, they already doing it. But I do think that those are skills that can be brought up, and people may do more if they realize that those are useful to connect and establish this relationship.
Yeah, I appreciate your comment. I think we have different perceptions, right, about where community member or community-based perspectives come from, academia, and this is part of it. This is actually the topic of this workshop today, is to help understand that and to help bridge it. But what I'm hearing from you is like, we need to take it further, at least, from some of the university faculty to know that there is a resource, or we can consult with to vet out our
I'm not, I
process.
actually don't want to say that. We need to make people, a faculty, thinking that they have to do exactly what you're saying they have to do. There is not a resources. We need to learn that we have to do the work. And so even just telling them, you're telling us today, and they're like a number of people. No, I was not saying you go to the resource and you use the resources. No, we need to learn it.
Mhm.
And so the fact that you see exactly what you're saying, I had to learn how to deal with people. I was just joking. I would say, I talked to someone and said, the first time I talked to you, I had no idea what you were talking about. You were way above my head. And then after a few months, it was like, oh, we're on the same page now. But I had to learn.
Mhm.
And so how do we teach faculty that they have to learn? Or people that don't know that? Because that's something that we need to learn.
Mhm. Betty, do you have any response to that in terms of, what's being shared, and the call to learn and to grow and to just be more effective, so it becomes something that's part of the culture? I think that might be something as a follow-up. And maybe how does the topic and the comments that we're talking about here within the different group, how can that be more useful, or something that faculty members who are interested in establishing the academic community collaborations can follow or can use as a guideline?
I think these are very useful insights that we've been talking about, the ideas of building trust and the importance of connections and relationships and communication. So that's another theme that I've been hearing today.
Mhm.
The importance of being able to communicate with each other and understand each other, what we've just been discussing in terms of learning each other's cultures. So yeah, I think that there have been a lot of great concepts that have come up from this workshop. And we're actually in our last 4 minutes here. So we're going to be wrapping up, and I'd like to thank everybody who was involved, Margarita and the facilitators, and everybody who came, who participated in the discussion groups. There was a lot of great readout that is going to be summarized. And Tony, I see your hand raised.
Sorry, I think it's just in response to the previous comment, I believe, by Isabella. I think it was really
Yes.
important. I think that or at least I think it is in part on the community's responsibility to try and hold academia accountable, right? Especially where most of us are at public universities. And we see community members trying to hold academia accountable currently across the nation. I think so. What is being proposed is, trying to learn how academia works and trying to force academics to perhaps conduct research that is really relevant to the community. So I think there are faculty perhaps that are in alignment and should try and empower community to ask more from their institutions, because we see that faculty may have their hands tied, but community organizations actually may have more power than they think, just like we see students have tremendous power as well.
That's great. Thank you, Tony. I agree that the community members should be working with the academic partners and be able to understand each other so that they can move forward. So we are wrapping up now, and we think that so the next workshop is going to be in June. Sorry, we don't have a workshop in June. We have a workshop in July. And so I'd just like to thank everybody again for this wonderful workshop, and looking forward to seeing you at the next one.